I want to tell you what a Gemara means. A cryptic Gemara that I think if we understand it correctly, not only can we learn a lot ourselves, but we can also discern, by analyzing this Gemara, how wise Chazal really were, and how they were up to really deep wisdom and practice, and a very specific kind of practice that I think we need to bring back to our lives. At least if we're to be faithful to what Chazal were up to and their attention to detail. They're caring so much about every single action. So this Gemara goes like this. The Gemara says that if someone takes a big step, he loses 1/500th of his eyesight, and the solution for it is drinking from Kiddush Friday night. So the two major problems with the Gemara are, number one, why would a person affect his eyesight by taking big steps? And number two, if he does, how does Kiddush wine, not known for its medicinal properties, how is Kiddush wine supposed to restore his eyesight? Okay? Now, without going into all of the background here, because I don't think this is the place for it, the meaning of the large steps that will take away a person's eyesight is the following. And I want to talk about two levels. I want to talk about this in the conceptual meaning, and like read the Gemara as an allegory first. And then I want to take the Gemara back to its practical level and show how, once we understand the allegory, once we understand what the symbolism is, then we can, in fact, transfer things back to a reality and talk about things as having a really causal, really taking a large step. I want to argue that literally taking large steps can affect your eyesight, and literally drinking from Kiddush can restore it. But first, in order to do that, we have to first understand this Gemara on the symbolic level, understand what this is all about, okay? So without going into all the background, how I know this, not the place for it, I'll tell you the following. The concept of taking a large step, or let's say the mindset that a person has when he takes a psia gasa, when he takes a big step, is that he has to get somewhere, right? So when a person takes a psia gasa, takes a large step, he's basically not living in the moment. He's basically, he has this feeling that he's here, but he really needs to be there. Hence, he'll do everything he can to get there quickly, as violent as it may be, and as disruptive as it may be to where he is or to his feeling of being present right here. And he's going to do his psia gasa to get there. Now, this is a very dangerous or a corrupting way to function, because if you want to understand the world properly, if you want to view the world properly, you have to view everything as contributing to the world's perfection. Meaning, the correct understanding of history, which is represented originally in the 6 days of creation, the correct way to understand that is to realize that you don't have to get someplace. Things are fine as they are, although the world is still in the process of being perfected. So we have to maintain in our minds that seeming contradiction. On the one hand, the world does undergo perfection. God's plan is still not complete. There's still work to do. On the other hand, that doesn't indicate, although one I think it does, that you'd rather be there than here. So you have to have this dichotomy in your mind. Our job is to improve the world. There's still work to be done. There are still things that have to be improved. There's ways to better ourselves and the universe. But don't think that means that things are imperfect in the sense that it would be better if you weren't doing exactly what you're doing in the here and now. And what happens is if you do think that things would be better if you were there, then you're going to view things incorrectly. You're going to conceptualize things. Your conceptual sense of view, how you perceive the world, is going to be flawed. Okay? How you perceive the world. Because you're going to see things that are part of a process and take time to unfold, and may not be perfect as they are, but are part of a process that tends and leads to perfection. And if you allow yourself to think in the long term and not to feel the need to take those big steps to get to the future now, if you allow yourself to take the long view and recognize that whatever you're doing contributes to some unfolding good that can take eons, if you accept that, then you'll have the correct view of the world. And if you negate that, or if you forget that, you'll have the incorrect view of the world. So that's what, figuratively, taking a large step ruins your eyesight means. 1/500th of your eyesight corresponds to the tree of life, which was 500 ames, but I'm not going to go into that now. Kiddush brings it back because Shabbos is the end game. Shabbos is symbolic of the end of time. And Shabbos symbolizes the fact that the world does tend towards perfection, and therefore we can rest. We don't have to take those large steps. We don't have to run. We don't have to push to get somewhere, because the world does in fact tend towards Shabbos. Okay? Not only is this the symbolism of the large steps, but this is in fact is a way to read a correct aspect of reading the sin of eating from the Eitz Hadas, and not waiting for Friday night when, if the Eitz Hadas was grapes, Friday night would have been Kiddush, of course. And of course, the woman saw the tree incorrectly. It's all about seeing. We're not going to go into that. So there's this idea about don't push, don't try to get somewhere that we're not ready for. Don't try to hasten to be someplace else. If you do, it's going to corrupt the way you view the world, okay? So now we just converted the Gemara into a figurative meaning. Now I want to take back the Gemara to a literal reading, and this is why I want to show you how deep Chazal were, and how they were, how deep they thought deeply into psychology and the human mind, and also how they developed specific practices. How this is Chazal's genius of connecting ways of thought to specific actions. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I know that you might have great ideas and great thoughts, but what typically happens when you have a great idea, when you have a great thought, what typically happens is that is really almost nothing, because you could think about it, you could consider it, but it doesn't usually carry over to your day-to-day life, which is where it matters. It doesn't change how you function in a very real, practical, immediate way. Although I must say that by revisiting thoughts and constantly going back to them, it does have an effect. But we really want to try to figure out how to take a thought and how to make it present in your mind when you're going to go back to the world and engage with the world and be doing the things that everyone does. So here's where Chazal come in and say, okay, we have this conceptual idea of don't take big steps. Don't feel this need to be there when you're here. In order to symbolize that, say Chazal, literally do not take big steps. So that every time you take that small step and you associate it in your mind, it doesn't always have to be conscious, it becomes a subconscious association. You associate that with this idea that I am exactly where I need to be, and everything is going in the right direction, and I don't need to push it. Then every time you take a small step, and literally it's important to not take a big step, because you need an action, you need a kind of practice that is going to make this idea of not having a need to be someplace else, it's going to make that idea part of your psyche. Okay? So that's step number one. Pardon the pun. Step number one is that you're going to have a practice. The practice is going to be don't take large steps. And that way, the idea of not taking conceptual large steps is going to be ever present in your life. Every time you walk, you're going to be doing something that reflects that. It's going to become part of you. You're going to think about it. You're going to represent that. It's going to be present in your mind. A person like that, what if he does inadvertently? So now we have a person at a very high level of action where he's really thinking about the conceptual or symbolism in his action. If that person breaks his symbol and he actually takes a large step, okay, what's going to happen is he's going to, by taking the literal large step, he's going to weaken the concept in his mind, the concept of not pushing and not trying to get somewhere, which he associated, he linked with the small steps. And he did that for a reason. He did that because you need a link with an action. So then by taking a large step, you're fraying that link, you're weakening it, and therefore you're weakening the concept of not looking ahead. And if you weaken next ideas, then if you weaken the concept of not looking to get ahead, you, this truly very sensitive, spiritually sensitive person who thinks about these things, you're going to notice that you're going to feel that I can't look at things correctly. In other words, I can't perceive things correctly. And, next idea, a person who's hyper spiritually sensitive, who knows that he's not really holding on the place where he can perceive things properly, will be less willing and less interested in looking at things, and therefore will find himself looking at things with less clarity, closing his eyes somewhat, not being willing to fully engage with the sight sense, which is important. The sight sense is important for the truly spiritual person as a portal for perception, obviously. He doesn't just go to museums and he doesn't look at things that are pleasing to the eye but don't have meaning. And since he severed, by taking a big step, he severed the link between meaning and external vision, because he disabled himself somewhat from being able to put things in perspective, right? Then he's going to not look. He's going to find himself not looking with the same robustness, and his eyesight will literally be affected. And then comes Friday night. That's a very powerful spiritual time to once again contemplate the idea of the future of the world and how the world is tending towards perfection. Drinking the Kiddush wine, and his eyesight will come back. He'll be able to look again. So I want to suggest again that the Gemara is very literal, really literal. And this is just, I think, a great idea. How to look at some chazals. The chazal mean literally exactly what they're saying. But for it to be literal, you have to first go through some really spiritual, some great spiritual exercises, and you have to inhabit the mental space that chazal want you to inhabit, or they themselves were inhabiting. If you inhabit a certain mental space, then this Gemara, and I suspect other Gemaras like it, will in fact become truly literal. So in a certain sense, you have to allegorize the Gemara, but after you allegorize it, then you go back and you say, you know what? If we live with the allegory, if we take the allegory and we actualize it in life, and we take specific actions that we could connect with the idea, then the specific actions become powerful and affect the allegory, which in turn affects us. Okay, that is my idea, and I think there's a lot to learn from this and a lot to think about here.